Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 218 of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. We have a great guest today, former Consular Officer Ben Arterburn. We're going to go over his career and also his contribution to the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox magazine article about adjudications in the O1 space in particular. I think you're going to enjoy that one a lot and just all the information he has. He also is either co-founder or a top person with Argo, which we're going to talk about. Mandy Fubacker, a regular guest on the show, is also co-founder of that. So we're going to go into detail about Argo and how they help immigration lawyers. But before we start, I do want to remind everybody that the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox magazine issue 3 is out. Go to immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com/magazine and you can check out that issue and previous issues. There's a lot of information there that's going to change your practice and really do great things for you. I want to thank our sponsors, in particular DocuWise, who's the sponsor of the podcast and the magazine. You can get additional 10% off your annual plan by going to DocuWise.com/immigration-lawyers-podcast and using the code Immigration Lawyers Podcast after that. They're a great service for all sorts of management and client preparation, case preparation in the immigration space. They're constantly adding new products. I just did an interview with the co-founder there and discussing all the new invoicing features that they're adding. I also want to thank Journey for their sponsorship of the magazine. Journey, Joorney, is a great business plan writing group that does all sorts of other stuff. And we're going to talk with them about all the products that they have. But as many of you may know them, they do business plans for e-visas, L-visas, O-visas, and they really help clients out to really specify what their business is so they could get the most success in their visa categories. But they also do general business plans too. And if you're not looking for a visa, but definitely for a visa, that's a great group to look into. And finally, for those interested in learning marriage immigration, fiance cases, K1s, we have courses coming out. Just email me at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com for these detailed courses that really hold your hand from beginning to end, how to do it. Other courses out there always seem like they're from the 10,000-foot view, but I really want to give exactly what you need to do so you're prepared if you're new or transferring this area or starting with family cases after you've done a bunch of business cases. So it helps out a lot of different practitioners. With that, I want to introduce Ben. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm good. How are you, John?
Doing good. So why don't you tell us about yourself, of where you just grew up and stuff and how you got into the service, and then we'll discuss Argo and O visas and all these other categories.
All right. Yeah, I'm originally from Kentucky, from a small town called Paducah, where I guess not a lot of people are leaving and going around the world like I have in my career. I got my original undergraduate degree in engineering, but I turned international after that. I went to China. I studied Chinese. I worked in China in advertising and media for a few years.
What years?
Came back. That was
What-
in 2000, from 2006 to 2010. That's what I was doing in China. Then I came back to the U.S.
Sorry to interrupt.
I was
this.
in
I
no,
want
no,
to
no. I like. I mean, I like talking about it. I was in China first in Nanjing, which is a city a couple hours from Shanghai, in Jiangsu province, where I studied Chinese. After that, I moved to Xi'an, which is famous for the terracotta soldiers, the terracotta army from the first emperor of China. And that was really a great place to learn Chinese because there isn't such a big international community. Not a lot of expats. There's more and more these days, but back then there definitely were a lot fewer. So you really had to be able to speak Chinese to get by. So it was a great place to learn.
What tier city are these? I'm assuming they're not first tier cities. They're second and third tier, or even fourth tier.
They're second, not really third tier, but second tier. Yeah, second, maybe third. Xi'an might have been third. It might be second now. But they're towns that might not be considered the biggest in China, but they're still cities of over 8 million people.
Yeah, that population in America is like the massive city, but there it's just like, third tier city. But one thing that happens when you're not in these major cities and you're an expat, I mean, you stand out. Like, did people pull over just take photos with you because of your skin color?
Back then, yeah, there was a lot of people that would want to come and take a picture, shaking hands or put their baby in my arms and take a picture like that. Yeah, less and less because there's just been more and more international exposure and people coming and going and settling and working there. But yeah, it was a great experience back then. Back then we didn't have smartphones where you can just point it at a Chinese character and it tells you exactly how to pronounce it and what it means. Back then I was carrying around a paper dictionary. I bought cargo pants with a big huge cargo pocket on it just so I could always be carrying around a big paper dictionary with me.
How old were you at the time?
22. That was right out of undergrad.
Really young. And so no
Yeah.
family and stuff. It was just you and the road, I guess.
Just me. I graduated with my degree in engineering and thought I haven't really done anything yet. I haven't seen anything of the world, so I just bought a ticket to China.
And what kind of stuff were you doing? Were you teaching English and stuff there, or other kind of stuff?
I enrolled in the university, Nanjing University. It's a really old historic university, and just took Chinese classes there full time for a year.
Hmm.
So that was pretty intense. And then after that, got a job at a media company. It's the company that produces. It's kind of like a very localized version of The Economist. It's called China Economic Review.
Hmm.
And did that for a while. Worked for some a Canadian university that had a partnership with a university in China, doing some engineering instruction for
Interesting.
students that were going to be going over to Canada to complete their degrees. And then eventually went back and got my master's degree in Chinese studies at Columbia in New York.
Interesting. There's a couple guys on YouTube that are expats who lived in China. They right now they're kind of like dissidents almost, but they said in the time you were there was the best. It was so open still. The crackdowns hadn't really come in as hard, and it was just a wonderful place to be and experience. And it's different, you know. It was even 2008. China was still coming up. I mean, but it's a tremendous amount of growth they had, so it must have been a blast. So,
Oh
what
yeah.
what happened after 2010? Or I think you said 2008 or
Yeah,
2010.
and then I went back to the U.S., went to New York, got a master's degree in contemporary Chinese studies, and applied for the Foreign Service, the State Department, and got in. So entered the State Department, which I don't know how much your listeners know about how that career works. You enter as a generalist, right? You could have a background in economics, international relations, law, or in my case, Chinese contemporary affairs, and then engineering before that. And then you enter as a generalist, and they can assign you to any job that they want to anywhere in the world. Because I already spoke Chinese, I was assigned to China to do visa interviews in Guangzhou,
Mhm.
which at that point was the largest visa processing post in the world. I think it probably still is today. Okay, let's say right from before the pandemic, it definitely still was.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I'm not sure who that title would go to. So I did 2 years of visas there. I did over a year in the non-immigrant visa section, and also did about 8 or 9 months in the immigrant visa section. So got full exposure to everything that's going on over there. Guangzhou does all of the immigrant visa cases for all of China, so it's a pretty heavy processing post. After that, because I already spoke Spanish, they sent me to Bogota, Colombia. And I was in Bogota for 2 more years doing non immigrant visas. And also, I was in the fraud prevention unit. So that was a whole different experience where you're not doing the visa interviews, you're only doing the cases that have flags that signal that an investigation needs to happen, or doing the kind of data analysis, which this is not big tech, it's the government, so it's not really super sophisticated data analysis, but trying to find trends, trying to identify ways that you can spot these fraudsters before they get to their visa interviews.
So let's talk about what kind of like things would pop up. I mean, were there times obviously where there's fraud indicators, but it turns out it was just like sloppy filling out the form or something like that. But what
Oh
kind of
yeah,
information can you share about the fraud accusation? Because it's a very serious accusation can really destroy like
oh yeah, oh yeah. The thing that's the most vicious is a poison pen letter, because somebody sends in a poison pen letter, it gets put into someone's case notes, and then the officers are told there's no such thing as a bad refusal. They're told this by their managers. And so a poison pen comes in, it's not vetted that much. It might just be put into the notes, and an officer sees, oh, somebody wrote a letter saying that this person intends to go work for their uncle in New Jersey. And without any investigation, they might just be inclined to 214B that person, if it's a 214B applicable visa class. So, there is a lot of things that I can't really talk about that they do in the fraud prevention unit, but a lot of things that it's really just kind of the concept of uh, people people getting themselves into unnecessary trouble. They find somebody that's cheap on the ground in their country that'll fill out the application for them. They fill it out sloppily. They don't know what's written in the application. Maybe that vendor that they went to is associated with some other fraud schemes, and so their IP address is flagged, and so they get flagged just by having gone to this vendor.
wow. Yeah. That's a mess. Yeah, I'd see it a lot. People who don't speak the language and have someone else fill it out, a travel agent fill it out who doesn't care enough to
Mhm.
pay attention or ask the details. Because that form, I mean, the DS 160, DS 260. I mean, when it just gets longer and longer. In 2008, 9 when I started, it was the DS230, which is like a 2 to 4 page thing. And now the DS260 is, I mean, it's just like whole thing. It takes hours to fill it out. And it's some parts are confusing. People don't know how to answer them. So that really follows you. So you're in China and then Colombia, and you must have really enjoyed both, especially Colombia is a lot of fun too, I'm guessing.
Colombia was a great place to be too. Also, it was one of the top 3 visa processing posts in the world while I was there. So I
Really?
was definitely I was in it when I was doing it. You know, there were never any slow days. There were days, I'll tell you, you know, the numbers that I would do, the most I did in a single day was 448 visas in Guangzhou in a single day. That was interviews at the window, and also these what we call the drop box, which is the interview waiver program visas, where you just do them. You know, they come and they're mailed in, and you just review them at your desk, and then issue them,
Yeah.
or 221G them if you have to. But then visa interviews at the window. Sometimes I would go over 300 per day, just interviews in the morning and afternoon if we were that busy.
I mean, you get drained by the end of that. You kind of collapse after like
Oh
interacting
yeah,
with people.
oh yeah. I mean, it's something where you are 100, if you're doing the job right, you are 100% engaged with every single person that walks up. You're trying to identify as quick as possible these factors, these trends, these archetypes of applicants that meet the criteria to issue the visa and ones that don't, and trying to put them in those boxes as quickly as you possibly can. And that's one of the big things that I think that visa applicants need to know is what type of time pressure the visa officers are under. People think that they've got a bunch of documents, they've got stacks and stacks of evidence and credentials, and that they're going to be able to go in and the visa officer is going to look at it all and obviously be convinced by this preponderance of evidence that's put in front of them. But really, you've got about 15 seconds to get that visa officer on the right track, thinking, okay, I'm going to issue this. Let me just collect a few more pieces of evidence to put in my notes, and then I'll issue them and send them on their way. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's it. But again, people contact me like want to prepare stuff and they have all these documents. I'm like, dude, this is gonna overwhelm the officer. They don't have time for this. Just get the basics. Don't say anything crazy. Fill out the DS-160 properly, and just be honest in anything they ask you. You know, the immigrant intent, especially for tourist visas, is the main thing.
Hmm.
And that's about it. Then hope for the best. There's not much you can do. It's up to discretion. So that's a
Yeah.
scary part. Discretion part is really scary. So go ahead.
Even in immigrant visas, you can't count on the officers to read everything that's put in front of them. I know you know this, but you know some attorneys that I've worked with, they've prepared a 10 or 15-page brief, and they say, I keep my brief short so the officers have, we'll read all of it. And I say, 10, 15 pages, you've got to catch their attention first and give them a reason to read those 15
Yeah,
pages, or they won't, right? So you've got to have, an executive summary at bare minimum that's going to tell them why they need to read this. Don't bury the lead, get that information up front to incentivize them to read this. Because even though, with immigrant visas and some of the non-immigrant visas, 214B is not an issue, but I'm sure that a lot of your listeners well know there's such thing as perpetual 221G, which is basically an intentional thing that sometimes the consular officers do to 214B people by other means.
yeah.
They don't like something about, let's say an H1B, and so they're just going to 221G it forever so that they never have to issue it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're both working on a case together that has its own issues. And it's like you never know.
Hmm.
Even the cleanest cases could have issues pop up. You said the poison pill issue could come up. It could just the person could come off bad during the application. They're nervous and just something hits the officer wrong way. It's like this person being fraud, and for seemingly no reason, things get denied or get caught up in this endless administrative processing. So what
Yeah,
happened
exactly.
after Venezuela? I'm sorry, Colombia.
After Colombia, I got my third posting, and that was as on the inside we call it the information officer in Shanghai, which really is the press secretary and spokesperson for the consulate in Shanghai.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so that was a much different type of job, much more public facing. Didn't have anything to do with the visas while I was doing that job. I had that job for 1 year, and then I left that in 2018. And then since then, I started doing what I'm doing now with Argo Visa. I started doing that just independently in China, just for Chinese clients in Shanghai, mostly for people that wanted to do L1A conversion over to an EB visa once
Yeah,
they got into the US, because the EB5 line was so long. And then with the pandemic and everything, that shut down all of this. And so now I'm back stateside, working with Argo Visa, which is a company, as you know, it's the first company that has this. We've got a network of 25 former visa officers that have worked all over the world in 35 different countries. We speak 14 different languages. We've done every possible type of visa class you can imagine, and seen everything that every type of visa and situation that's ever occurred. We've adjudicated. We actually added this up, over 1 million visas total between the 25 of us. So
What is
now we brought all that expertise and all that experience together to help the visa applicants.
what is your title with the company?
Director of Consular Affairs, which
Wonderful.
kind of mimics a little bit of what goes on inside the Bureau of Consular Affairs
Yeah.
inside the State Department.
10 years ago, and it did before when you start getting into go to state, like, did you ever imagine consular processing or visa classifications were something to get into? Because I imagine
Oh
people
no,
think they're going to be living this, movie lifestyle as work with the State
yeah,
Department, but proving visas is probably the last thing most of them think about, unless they're
yeah.
immigration attorneys or
Well,
something.
the lifestyle is all right. They put you up in some nice lodging. Your apartment's nice. You're in a nice area of town. You get taken care of. Basically, you get really well taken care of. But no, the job, I wasn't expecting to just be in this type of basically like a large customer service processing center
Yeah,
for 4 years. I kind of thought, yeah, I'd be assigned to different work that might be more diplomatic in terms of like what you'd imagine in a movie. Receptions and meeting with other government officials from the host country and working on policy. But then you get assigned to the jobs you get assigned to, and it's just kind of the random nature of how things in life can go. And so I got 4 years of doing this day in, day out, engaging with not only the visa regulations, and as immigration attorneys, you all know way more than I do about the INA itself, about the law, but about how it actually works on the inside, the procedures on the inside of the consulate, how that works, and even more important, the thinking of the consular officers, which
hmm,
is really uniform around the whole world because everybody moves every 2 years, and it kind of keeps the same thinking, the same standards, the same culture going amongst all the consular officers, and just knowing how that works, and knowing, I think I was always a little bit of a contrarian on the inside. I never bought into kind of this adversarial stance that they seem to take towards the applicants, like it's us versus the applicants for a lot of the consular officers. For me, maybe it's because I was assigned to China and I'd already lived in China for 5 or 6 years before starting the job. I felt a lot of empathy toward the visa applicants that I was having to make decisions
yeah,
on, and it was going to affect their lives in a huge material way. If I say, okay, yes, or oh, no, I don't think that what you're telling me is legit. And so I really was trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? What pitfalls are they running into where they need help? What have they done wrong that if they had done it right, they would have gotten their visa very easily?
yeah.
And why are they happening? And now I was, probably after a year in, I knew that at some point I was going to be leaving and using this knowledge and expertise, and insight to try to help people on the outside get past this really opaque and sometimes really dehumanizing process.
And the article you contributed to the last issue of the Immigration Lawyer Toolbox magazine was about this focus on the O1 area and the difficulties that come out. Even though USCIS adjudicates it, there's two bites at the apple. So there's another if you're doing constant processing for the visa, and you have to go and do an O interview, and that's up in
Mhm.
the air. There's issues that pop up with that.
Yeah, it's they do tell the consular officers explicitly in the FAM, and their bosses tell them this. When there's an approved petition, that's of course prima facie evidence that the applicant qualifies for the visa class. But they are supposed to use their local knowledge and their linguistic skills to confirm that all that information is actually true, right?
Mhm.
So let's say these awards and these publications and stuff were all done outside of the U.S. Well, they're supposed to use their local expertise, relying on local staff too, to confirm that these are actually prestigious publications, that these awards actually do exist, that the credentials that they're presenting are actually legitimate. Now that's reasonable. That's something that we would expect them to do. What a hurdle that people don't expect is just the grilling and the suspicion that they might face when they go into one of these interviews.
Mhm.
I was actually just consulting with an EB1A client this morning, where it's a lot of the same stuff that's going on with the O1 visas, and getting him to be able to put into terms that a layperson can understand what his contribution in the medical field was, right? So at first he told me it was about a 10-minute spiel about, I didn't honestly understand it. And I was like, I need to listen, we got to simplify this, because you want that visa officer to just know immediately, oh, intuitively, I know what you're talking about. You're talking
Yeah.
about heart transplants after after the patient has already been deceased, right? That makes sense. You gotta like sift through that
Yeah.
very professional terminology and get to something that the visa officer can understand immediately. Um, the other thing is that the visa officers expect the visa applicants to be their own advocates in their interviews, right? Sometimes a problem that applicants will get into is that they'll show up with all the documents that their lawyer has diligently prepared for them, and they think that it's been taken care of. They're just showing up. They're going to get their visa, and then they start getting grilled by the officer, and they don't know specific details from their petition. They didn't prepare it themselves. So they hesitate in their answers, or
Mhm.
it seems like they're fishing for that information. And the officer thinks, well, I don't like this. This sounds like this person wasn't even involved in this process.
Yeah.
And then you get a 2-to-1G.
Yeah.
And then these days, it gets harder and harder to actually get in touch with a consulate, with a consular officer inside a consulate or an embassy abroad. They put more and more walls up where it's actually just getting diverted to these third-party contractors who just look in the system. It tells them 2-to-1G, and they just reply, "You're in 2-to-1G."
Yeah.
So it really pays to get that issuance the first time that you show up there, because you really have very few ways to contact an American consular officer, get them
Mhm.
to actually review whatever information you're providing, compare it to the case, make a decision, provide you with some information. It's just it's harder and harder, it seems, every year.
Yeah, I mean, more and more people are taking the lawsuits now, especially for
Mhm.
administrative processing, which is more expensive, and it's not guaranteed to work, so it's a big hassle. Now you did mention local staff. How much do they participate in the visa process? The local people that you hire on staff.
They do a lot of the administrative intake. When someone comes in for an immigrant visa, they're going to first go to a window where they're checking in with a local staff who is going to take their documents. They're going to input all their information into the system. They do a lot of checking boxes at first. Like, they're going to say, okay, do they have their medical report? They might compare. They might look at the date at when it was performed and see if it's expired or not. Same for the police certificate. They might check the box like, okay, they've got the affidavit of support in here, but they don't have a notarized birth certificate. So then once that's all done, they're going to take that. Your applicant is going to go and wait to be called by the American officer. The American officer calls them, and they've got a case there that's already been pre-vetted by the local staff just for completeness, right? Are
Yeah.
all the documents that are required to be there actually in there? Then they're going to look at that, and they're going to start asking questions to try to, verify this person's credentials or verify the bona fides of the relationship, whatever the visa may be.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's such an important process, consular processing. I was always recently, it just came to my attention that not that many immigration lawyers have handled consular processing, because when questions pop up and if you are asking, so I thought everyone is standard part of their practice where they do consular processing, especially for immigrant visas. But there's a wide swath of immigration lawyers who just do court work or stateside USCIS kind of stuff.
Mhm.
It's such a nuanced aspect, and you know each country's documents are different. Each embassy inevitably will handle things differently, and so it's really kind of one of those things you have to get experience and know how to do it. And it just takes years of knowing what to watch out for and dealing with the National Visa Center, and then the next step, the embassy, and just how to even communicate with the embassies. Like China, you have to go to their website. They have a portal to do it. If I email them to the email that they have, they're not going to respond. Whereas some embassies will, and each embassy does differently. The K1 is different everywhere. The E2 is different everywhere. So it's really an acquired experience that you have to have, and Argo is really beneficial in giving that service. So if people wanted to contact with you in Argo in particular, could you talk about what Argo does? So if immigration lawyers want to send their clients over, could you talk about that?
Yeah. So basically, what we do in general, and I'll get more specific for what we can do for immigration lawyers. In general, we have a platform where we find clients all over the world who have different visas that they're applying for, different situations that they're in, and they can sign up. They enter their information, the language that they speak, the embassy that they're going to apply at, and then we match them up with officers that have experience in those countries and speak those languages if they need a language other than English for their consultation.
Mhm.
Um, for student visas, this is pretty straightforward. For tourist visas, well, honestly, there aren't that many being issued right now, so that's not a big part of the work we're doing. Mostly a whole lot of student visas, a lot of temporary work visas, H-1Bs, L-1s. We do have a lot of EB-3s that come through. Now, this is something that actually plays more into what the immigration attorneys might be interested in. EB-3s, E-2s, K visas, spousal visas. These are the ones where a lot of times people find us after they've already had a problem, and it's understandable. People don't expect that this is going to turn out to be a problem. People know that their relationship's legit. They know themselves that they're qualified, and they just don't expect that they're going to face a government official who then is going to think that they're a fraudster and they're lying about this relationship or this job or these credentials that they're presenting. And so they come to us, and a lot of our clients, we do consultations with them and with their attorneys at the same time to go through everything that's been happening in their case. We have a couple officers who are real experts in E2s. Brazil processes a whole lot of these E2s for third country nationals that are in Brazil, and they're applying for these Italian and European dual citizens of Brazil that apply there. Also, we have people that did them in Mexico. We have people that did them in London. And so we've got a broad swath of experience, and we consult amongst ourselves quite often to kind of trade experiences, talk shop about how the E2s were done. And like you said, E2s is one that is done completely differently depending on which post you're talking about. Some of them want you to submit your package a month beforehand, and it's going to get reviewed and vetted, and then you're going to show up and they've pretty much already gone through it and decided what they're going to do before you get to the interview. When I was in Bogota, I was doing the E2 interviews, and I didn't see that E2 submission until the afternoon when the interviews were going to occur. So I would get that on my desk, and then I'd start reviewing them, and a local staff would come up and tell me, okay, Mr. Martinez is here, go and interview him. And I might have looked at it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Wow. And so it's just, and that changed while I was in Bogota. A new officer arrived who had been at a different post, and he wanted to change up the process. And so it really is just kind of like dependent on the local management, how willing they are to allow change to happen. And I will say that in a lot of ways, they are very amenable to change, because for people's annual performance reviews, you have to show that you did something. You have to show that you implemented something new, you made a difference. And so people like to implement little changes all the time, which accounts for how something may have been going one way. Let's say in Paris, you've been seeing things work one way in Paris, and then all of a sudden there's a change. There's been no policy change. It's just one person's initiative to do something new, to be able to put some laurels on their accomplishments.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen this when one embassy was great with answering emails, and all of a sudden they stop, and then they just really formalize. They have to go through whole hurdles to get them. And then another embassy all of a sudden never respond. All of a sudden it's super helpful to email to fix stuff up. I'm like, well, that's a pretty rapid change I wasn't expecting. So, officers move around, they bring these stuff with them. So it's, as you said, beginning, it's the same because they always move around, but at the same time it's different. It's Consul is just its own beast, its own world, and it's good to have you guys to kind of fill us in on what's going on. I love having former consular officers on the show, because it kind of pulls back the curtain a little bit to see what's going on here, because it's so, I think opaque is the word, or just it's hard to really see what's happening, because state is the most secretive. I mean, even foiling is difficult and communication is hard, and they have consular non-reviewability, which is, I understand why they have it. It makes sense, but it doesn't help the burn of it, the pain of it. Sorry, I see your name, Arterburn. I put the burn in my head, but
there you go.
when you can't communicate, you can't try to just talk with them to fix things up. It's hard, but it is what it is. But most cases do happen the way they're supposed to. But there's always random ones in there. If people want to reach out and get to reach out to Argo, who should they contact and where should they go?
You can contact us at hello@argovisa.com. That's our public email address. That we always have somebody that really understands what's going on with visas, reviewing anything that comes in. So if you've got anything you want to talk to us about, send us a message there. You can also find me or Mandy on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Stay on the line. I'm going to end the show, but I want to talk a couple more minutes with you. Thank you everyone for listening. Check out Ben's article at the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox magazine. Go to immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com/magazine, page 84, an article on O1A visa processing. even if you're not doing 018, it's really good to read this to get the perspective, because there's always overlap in visa categories and how they're adjudicated. So you'll definitely get something out of it. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, John.